Submarine deal with the US could once again be under threat as harsh new steel and aluminium tariffs make it harder and more costly to build subs.
This comes as President Donald Trump has tasked his right-hand man, Elon Musk, with reviewing America's shipbuilding capabilities. To discuss, we are joined by US political scientist Simon Jackman. Good morning to you, Simon.
Morning.
Hello.
Morning.
What do we know about Elon Musk's new assignment and what it could mean potentially for AUKUS?
He's been assigned part of DOGE to now take a look at this particular part of US military kit procurement. Now, here's one thing you'll say, can he do for building submarines what he's done for building space rockets? Because if he could, that'd be really good, right? Because there's a big problem with defense procurement, be it in the United States or Australia. Boy, oh boy, it's one of the most expensive things anybody does on planet Earth. Trying to get that running more efficiently. Wow, how about it, Elon? And maybe spend your time there. Might be actually a really productive thing for a guy with his engineering sensibility to do. The downside, of course, for Australia is that it opens a Pandora's box that a lot of people inside the United States who are skeptical about this deal, right, it's another opportunity for them to sort of slow this down or pump the brakes on it, which isn't in Australia's interest.
Yeah, if AUKUS doesn't happen, is there a plan B?
No.
Why? It just falls over.
Well, that part of it falls over, right? That would be really bad, right? If writing these checks to the US Treasury at the moment, and then for Australia to wind up with nothing.
With no backup option.
There is no, right? We said no to the Japanese build, right? Then we flipped to the French build, and now we've flipped from the French build to the US build, right? And so at this point, meanwhile, the world is moving on. Australia desperately needs some serious capability. We are a maritime nation. I think there's a strong argument that we need something like nuclear-powered submarines, that level of deterrent and capability. The US is about the only place at this point we're going to get that from. Let's not have this one go sideways.
Particularly when we're seeing Chinese warships right off our shores as well. I want to switch to tariffs, obviously the big theme of the last couple of weeks. Beijing has hiked up its tariffs back to America and now says 125% for you, take that. What I was interested in, Simon, is that China's foreign ministry says that the US, quote, stands to become a joke in the history of the world economy. Take that, America. Where to from here?
Yeah, look, two things to say about that. One is, anything that slows down the Chinese economy is not a good news story for Australia in the medium to longer term. In the short term, it's probably not bad for Australia, and that if China is saying no to US imports through extraordinarily high reciprocal tariffs, then Australian beef, Australian dairy, Australian wine, go. The bigger danger is perhaps in the longer term that when you put 125% tariffs on one another, the incentive to do a deal, despite those harsh words, the incentive to get a deal done is immense. And in the longer term, does Australia get cut out as China and US stitch up a very favourable reciprocal term? They can talk themselves back. It doesn't look like it this morning, but that's the longer term thing to keep an eye on. It was something we were worried about big time in Trump Mark 1, that there'd be a deal done between Trump and China and Australia would be left out in the cold.
Yeah, well, Trump says he's now going to reduce the baseline 10% tariffs for some countries. What's the end game here?
Yeah.
What's the plan? Are we talking to China or are we talking to the US? Are we waiting to see how that plays out? What's Trump thinking?
Well, the end game for the US, I think Trump, it's unclear. I think more manufacturing jobs coming back to the US, that will tick the box for Trump. That may take a while. Right?
Yes.
For Australia, I think it's, don't do anything silly. Like there's no, as we've talked about this over multiple weekends now, there's no upside for Australia in imposing tariffs on US imports. It's a single source for a lot, where we're going to get aviation parts, some of the pharmaceuticals we get from the US. That makes no sense for us. In the short term, go at the fact that we've rebuilt the China relationship. That's back in better shape than it was 5 years ago. And India, huge emerging market for Australian exporters. Play that game really hard because A, there's a lot of short-term gains to be had, but B, insurance against that longer-term fallout if and when the United States and China finally talking themselves down from the ledge.
So take a deep breath. Wait to see how this plays out.
Always good advice.
Mum and Dad are fighting.
I'll wait to see what Donald Trump has up his sleeve next.
Who knows, huh?
Simon Jackman, thank you so much as always for joining us.